show, everybody. Doing something a little bit different today. As most of you know, I live out here in fabulous Las Vegas, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. I'm here with Zach Bradford, the CEO and one of the founders of Cleanspark. Cleanspark is a renewable and clean Bitcoin mining operation that recently came out to Las Vegas within the last few years. I believe maybe about 2 years. They have quite a cool story. They've been in the headlines a lot recently for the good news of Bitcoin miners and not the Bitcoin miner capitulation that's been all over the news. So without further ado, Zach, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Jake, thanks for having me on here. Excited to have a chat today.
Yeah, me too, man. When you guys first moved out here to Las Vegas a few years ago, I was like, oh, there's a Bitcoin mining operation. It's cool because I'd always been trying to bring the crypto conversation mainstream. I used to work hand in hand with the city of Las Vegas and the Gaming Control Board and the university to try to get that conversation going out here in Las Vegas. There's so many cool opportunities, and just that the city of entertainment needs to have a decentralized currency and also to bring a lot of entrepreneurs out here. So before we do dive into that, tell us a little bit about who Zach Bradford is, maybe when you joined Cleanspark or the idea, and kind of how has that journey been up into leading to Las Vegas?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I helped co-found the company. So back in 2014, actually, the co-founder and I, Matt Schultz, who's now our chairman, we were actually working on a waste to energy technology. So about as far away from, anything crypto as you could think of. And we spent the next couple of years building an energy company, got in the software space where we were managing energy, basically microgrids and how they interact with the grid. It was all about energy savings. You fast forward into 2019, we built a great company. Things are going well. I actually flew out to see a data center. That would have been, I guess, early 2020. And just before, obviously, the whole pandemic wave happens, and walked into a data center to talk to about energy and efficiency and how it could save money, just to find out, what they were doing was Bitcoin mining. So started to get an understanding of Bitcoin mining, what it really meant. And, took a few months for me to fully get orange pilled, but, realizing that, Bitcoin is, its connection to energy is everything, right? It's about using energy, converting it to a digital currency, and the value really that brings. Of course, didn't happen overnight. It took a while to get into the process. But what I'll tell you, attracted me, and really kind of my aha moment was when you're trying to build a sustainable energy company, you're selling savings usually. Hey, it's cheaper month to month if I have solar on my roof for a business or something like that, right? And it's hard to get people to pay for savings because it's a net, delta. When it comes to Bitcoin mining, you're building the infrastructure of the future to drive energy into something that creates immediate value. And I think that that's the difference, in this country. Nobody's built infrastructure for decades until Bitcoin miners, came in full force on the scenes. And, we're building the infrastructure of the future in the form of both power infrastructure and computing power infrastructure. So, that was kind of the journey. A little bit more about myself. My background's finance. I have a master's in accounting. I've been always involved in, building companies for a long time. I've had accounting firms. We've had the waste energy firms. I've been involved in a few other ventures. Just kind of a true entrepreneur is how I've always looked at things. And I think that the pieces came together because, I think that the best way to, understand and build a business is you have to know how the numbers and the financials work. And the best way to build a Bitcoin mining company is to connect that with energy. And so that's kind of how I got to where we are today. Since then, I believe we're following about the third largest publicly traded Bitcoin mining company. We're doing very well in light of, we're seeing a lot of pain in the market, but we're extremely happy with where we're at right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up an article here in a second, but yeah, you guys have been all over the news, finding a lot of success. I know Marathon, I think is the biggest, was also headquartered out here, although they do not have a facility out here. It's quite interesting to find everybody move their way out to the desert. A lot of benefits. So as somebody who was working on just an energy company, and then you took your background of finance, combined it, and of course it spits out this beautiful baby of Cleanspark, clean Bitcoin mining. Are there any parallels to the traditional energy system and Bitcoin mining that helped you guys find so much success to be the number 3 Bitcoin mining company in the United States?
You know, I think what really drives it is the connection point. You can't ignore either side of the equation. So you look at a lot of the pain that's happening in the industry, and it's, you know, people that got surprised by the way the future energy curves turned out, right? Obviously, we got a big surprise with, you know, or an unexpected impact with, you know, the war in Ukraine and, you know, how that impacted energy markets. But if you know, we've always taken a forward-looking approach. So although running a business where you have an end customer and you're selling energy products is something we don't do anymore, all the knowledge that we gleaned along the way of how to interact with grids, because that's what our software did, right? And so if you just realize that, you know, all of our sites are grid connected, so we have a, you know, power being provided by utility. And basically how you make money is the margin between, you know, your power cost for the majority of your expense and the Bitcoin that comes out. So you can kind of try and arbitrage on paper a lot of things, but if you understand the intricacies of how a grid actually works, I think that that's proved very instrumental in our success. So really kind of bringing that knowledge forward is what did it. That's kind of been, I'd say, a differentiating factor in our ability to find success in sometimes hard markets. Because, you know, for example, we're in Georgia, is where most of our facilities are. We're also in New York. Both of those states have had their own energy issues, and we've done very well managing through it. And it's just because of our knowledge of how things actually work and the ways to manage around it.
So somebody who's running a clean Bitcoin mining operation, what type of regulatory arbitrage does a company have to go through? As you mentioned, you're in multiple states. Usually the underlying mechanism is price, right? We're all capitalists at the same point. We have to run a business and a P&L. What are the different issues that, or I guess you'd say, what are the common different issues that you see within the different states of the United States that sometimes prevent or makes it tough to set up a Bitcoin mining operation?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, if you were to go state by state, you first have to find a state that is open to change in how the world works. And what I mean by that is, you know, a Bitcoin friendly or a crypto friendly state. And I think that that's like a key thing on background you have to have. Like we do have operations in New York, but would I build a new operation tomorrow in New York? I wouldn't, because, you know, this state hasn't been welcoming to it. So if you were to look at all 50 states, you know, that's kind of the first swipe is you have to say, hey, there's 20 or 30 that have kind of set up open their doors and want business to come in this way. The second is you have to then look at those states and you have to look at what the energy prices are. Because, you know, ultimately, if the cost isn't there, you can't go find it in certain corners unless the kind of that base is there. So we then looked, for example, Georgia, we really like, it's got low energy prices. Part of the reason it has low energy prices is because there is abundant energy. We're huge proponents of nuclear power, produces carbon-free power. It makes up a very large component of our, you know, energy. And that's what we really focus on. So it's, you know, business friendly. It's then what are the energy prices? Is it abundant power or scarce power? You know, Bitcoin miners can set up locations in both places because both sides of that equation can provide a net benefit, right? It's kind of the stranded end of use power that, is scarce and you use it, when it's there. For example, this could be flare gas, which we don't do any of, but there are some miners that are successful doing it. We've gone the abundance route where you can then provide value back to the grid. Texas is another example of scarcity, but because of the ability for miners to interact with the grid, it can provide a lot of value and ultimately drive down prices. So that's kind of like the biggest things on the checklist that anybody mining would need to go into.
Wow, that's it's quite interesting. So as the name mentions, Cleanspark, there's right now a huge debate and a lot of criticism towards Bitcoin is those who operate with not renewable sources. Those are who are digging into the ground, or you mentioned the flare gas. What makes up the clean composition of Cleanspark between, we'll say, water, you mentioned nuclear, solar, and then where do you think that trend is generally going for the most optimal source of renewable energy for Bitcoin mining?
We focused on nuclear power. So Georgia is one of the few states that has nuclear power, and I think the only state that's building new nuclear power at this point in time. So there's going to be more added to the grid, and every time that there's, for example, a nuclear power plant, Vogtle 3 is supposed to turn online in the very near future. When it turns on, they're actually going to be taking off the non-renewables, the coal, right? Now, natural gas is still a very important piece of their total grid, but nuclear is becoming a bigger component. We also specifically purchase, access to nuclear power. So that's been our focus. I think that, one of the things to look at is for Bitcoin mining to truly be, have an impact on where renewables or carbon-free power goes in the future. We've got to participate in markets that are transitioning or going to transition. I think that's one thing that, and there's a lot of people that would give feedback that says, oh, ESG is just a word that gets thrown around, or, oh, renewables or things like that. And, there is truth to some of that in the sense that energy must transition. If we wanted to build a big solar farm tomorrow, it would take a couple of years to permit, build, and get operational. Well, how are we going to finance a solar farm if we're not mining and cash flowing now, right? So you have a chicken before egg problem. And that's why we think it is important to be in areas where there's transitions. Renewables also have, downside. They are intermittent. They're, wind produces only when it's windy. Solar only produces when the sun's out. So we think that participating in an entire grid ecosystem is the way forward. So to step back and, where do we think it's going? I think it's just about being thoughtful on where whatever you're using for power today, is it going to be better or worse from a sustainability point of view in 5 years, right? And I think as long as you're focusing on it being better in in a transition period and you're actually doing it, I think that's what matters. It's this way. Whenever you are in a market that's a chicken before egg scenario, you need to not eat the egg before it hatches. There's a lot of people saying that they're going to do things that I think we're going to be proven that they're not actually doing. And I think that's one of the dangers of Bitcoin mining is from a regulatory point of view, we need to stay on the offensive. We need to self-govern rather than be governed. And I think if we're always pushing forward and making progress, that's really ultimately what matters from a sustainability point of view. That's why, our message, as much as we use clean and renewable power, we really are trying to focus on sustainability, because you have to have sustainable business practices paired with your sustainable energy. And we think it's a strong offensive move for us. And really, we believe that the industry should take on to protect against the unnecessary regulation that can come in with some of the criticisms on the energy use of proof of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just saw Ethereum move from proof of work to proof of stake. And we know that when you make that transition, you kind of sacrifice some of the ethos of the space, which is decentralization. Yeah. Bitcoin, though, it's the first one. It's been around the longest. It has its own unique culture, which is has some good parts. It has obviously some maximalist parts, but that's always seems to be the component of it. As one of the leaders, do you see, or do any of the like Bitcoin evangelists reach out to try to help capitalize Cleanspark, maybe for some like entrepreneurial partnerships or investments? And then I guess the broader question is, does Cleanspark actively engage with like the Bitcoin community?
Oh yeah, 100%. We definitely do. Now, when we do engage, we do it at multiple levels. We are not making outward investments into, for example, like layer 2 technologies and things like that. That's largely due to because we have our own goals that we kind of need to conquer first. And especially in this bear market, we truly believe that our capital and efforts are used, here in house, where we can control our own destiny. But we are very supportive of some of the things that are being built. We're in active communication, with some of the opportunities. And, I think that, the bear market's going to go through its cycle and it's going to come back up. And I think this is a great opportunity to see the projects, especially, for example, layer 2s that are going to succeed layer 2s on the Bitcoin side, of course. And then, the ones that can survive a bear market and thrive even, those are the projects that we're going to want to get involved in the next bull market when there is capital that can flow out more plentifully into the markets. Now, we don't get involved in any other projects outside of kind of the Bitcoin network. And, to kind of go back to your point on the proof of stake, I want to circle back to that if you don't mind, because I think that that's one of those things is it's an either or, being, fought over and, thrive and survive on two sides. And I personally view it a little bit differently. Each of them have a different utility. Bitcoin, I truly believe proof of work is the only way to secure, the value that it has. There is no CEO of Bitcoin. It's the trust-free system where you don't have to trust another human being. You just know the algorithm isn't going to inflate supply. It's not going to change supply. No matter what FTX does, there's still a block produced every 10 minutes. And that's the value in Bitcoin. Ethereum, and I don't mean this in any offensive way, it's kind of like the app store of the blockchain. Its utility is to provide other utility and tools in this entire ecosystem, right? And there's an absolute place for it. And it should be proof of stake in that case. There's some real flaws to it, which we can dig into or not dig into. But why should something that's essentially the app store of the digital universe be proof of work and use all that power? Maybe it does need a Bitcoin of Ethereum, a CEO of Ethereum, because it essentially has one. The way that their governance works, people have influence on it, and it essentially runs like a company. So I think that rather than saying, Bitcoin uses, power and should switch, you need to look at the whys of both of them. And I think that there's real validity saying, yeah, Ethereum is different. And so it's fine to be proof of stake, but don't confuse Ethereum for holding up the value that Bitcoin has. And I think that that's kind of this fundamental thing that I think if the community could agree to a sense on that, we could all progress forward together and quit fighting on Twitter about things like that.
Absolutely. I think that distinction and differentiation is very vital and important. I share the same exact views. I've held both. It's this Ethereum's the smart contract layer and Bitcoin is the base layer, right? They can both be used as a currency, but Bitcoin is that pure decentralization. It's going to be probably likely the most decentralized asset that's going to exist because of all the dismissed attack vectors because of how Satoshi decided to implement the strategy. It's really quite unique. You did mention something about FTX, right? We're going right through just another implosion. This happens. I've been through a few bear cycles now, and everything is going to build itself back up. And these bear markets definitely take out some of the bad actors or the negligent entrepreneurs. As you mentioned, Cleanspark is a publicly traded company. Coinbase, also a publicly traded company, two companies that are going through no issues right now, right? Because of you're held to kind of a different standard. So just curious on like what your opinion is, or as being a CEO of a company in the crypto world that's publicly traded and you have to follow by different standards. Has that been a greatly impactfully positive experience, a negatively experience? And how is it just having to abide by different standards in the rest of the industry?
I think that for us, it's obviously proved great, but I think that, that the counterpoint could be, if a private company behaved as well as they should, then the regulation wouldn't be necessary. So you end up with this catch-22 where, nobody wants to be overly regulated. I said it myself, I think that self-regulation versus, heavy regulation is the better route, but people have to prove that they can self-regulate. And when, examples like FTX happen, it starts to create a narrative that, as an entire ecosystem in the crypto space, we need to, fight against. You hear it a lot in the Bitcoin space and also in other areas, but, not your keys, not your coin. We saw that happen. Ultimately, there's going to be bad actors. And this is an extremely public showing of bad acting. And that's why, for our company, our focus is trust and transparency. You'll find it all over our website, but it's not just a word, we mean it. Now transparency comes with being public, but even when you're public, trust matters, and people trusted FTX, and it's going to be really hard for exchanges in the future to regain that trust. And potentially that's where regulation steps in, is people have to find a way to regain it. I'm not advocating for heavy regulation, but I do think we should advocate that, an exchange where people are going to put their hard-earned money into should be transparent. And there shouldn't be this big find out after the fact that your funds were shuffled off to a sister company. That's just unacceptable in how the ecosystem should work. We basically the ecosystem was fooled. And, I think it's up to the ecosystem also to make sure we don't get fooled twice. And so I think we have choices that we can use with our money in the same way that you can, vote. You can choose which exchanges you go to. And if the entire market said, I'm not going to put my funds with an exchange in this case that isn't going to be transparent with me, then that exchange isn't going to exist tomorrow, and only the exchanges that are transparent. So I think the transparency is ultimately what matters. Public, international company, whatever it is. The blockchain has given us tools to see into what's going on. And unfortunately, there wasn't enough checking or enough transparency provided by these entities. I think we're going to see a cascading issue of, and even some innocent parties that fall as a result of this because they put their trust in the wrong party. So it's really unfortunate, and so I think the transparency, and I don't think a government needs to force anybody. I think the market, as a market, we need to force people, or exchanges in particular. We need to force exchanges to be transparent. And I think that'll solve a lot of it with or without government intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. The buzzword of this year is contagion, right? We're gonna see more. Unfortunately, you see some of the Bitcoin borrowing and lending platforms are taking some impact, and as well as a bunch of other innocent bystanders, as we could say, although it is a little bit of the wild, wild west. I pulled up the website. It shows everywhere that Cleanspark exists between the mining facilities and corporate headquarters. You see, you're out here, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit, all of the mining facilities out here on the East Coast. You got one in Texas, and then you moved your corporates out to the West Coast. What was the reasoning? I guess this is kind of what I've always been wondering since I found out you guys moved out here. Why move the headquarters down here to sunny Las Vegas? And is there any plans to move some of the mining facilities out to the West as well?
I'd love to. So part of the reason we're out here is because we've actually always been out here. We had a small corporate office in Utah that we're using as kind of the corporate address. We could easily use the corporate address at Georgia. I've been in Vegas for the last 10 years, actually. And we've built our company from Las Vegas. Whether we had, satellite offices or operations in other states, we have it centralized. So here in Vegas, you're going to find the executive team, you're going to find the accountants, you're going to find the lawyers, you're going to find, a lot of strategy gets decided here. And then each site, has its own team leads, and we have great teams everywhere. But, with Bitcoin mining, even if we were in Atlanta, for example, we have two sites about an hour apart in Atlanta. Then we have two sites that are about an hour outside of Atlanta. We're going to build in Texas. So, being decentralized as a company is something that we do just as much as, the Bitcoin blockchain is. We just communicate a lot, and it works very, very well. There's a lot of talent in Las Vegas too, as far as like the tech space and, the knowledge bases out here. So that's why we're out here in sunny Las Vegas. I would love to bring some mining into town or anywhere in Nevada, to be frank. Energy prices, of course, matter. We're not far off from where we need to be as far as pricing goes here in Nevada, but it's hot here. And of course, when you're aiming for efficiency, we have to do a lot of air cooled, but we do immersion cooling. So I think if we ever do bring anything into town, it'll be immersion cooled. We do hopefully have plans to set up a pilot program in the near term out here. But there's a piece of that technology that needs to improve, and that's really the heat exchangers or the dry coolers. There's a little bit to go, and there's a lot of development going on. So the tanks are great. The actual things that you would look at, it's kind of the ancillary pieces. Once you get to 117, like we get out here, the ability to actually exchange that, hot into cold starts to be challenged. So it's just frankly easier also to mine in the climates that we're in. So climate is a big factor. I guess that wasn't one of the things I mentioned in checking the box, but I think we're very, very close to solving some of those issues as an industry on the immersion side. And I think that would be the impetus for us to bring some a little closer by.
Yeah, I really, really hope so. I pulled up here. Yeah. You guys are running 5.1 exahashes a second, which is it's a lot of computing power. 3,622 calendar year-to-date production, 54,000 operational miners. What type of mining rigs does Cleanspark operate? Are they all the same? I know every year they come out with these the standard A6 from a few different companies, or does a industrial grade mining operation have to have a very specific miners because of just the sheer size of these farms?
Yeah, so we're using, I'd say we're like 90% Bitmain, S19 and S19J Pros and XPs. So basically the latest generation. There's of course different classes, similar chips that Bitmain is using. So we're about 90% there. We're maybe another, 6-7% of the micro BT What's miners, and we have a small percentage of the Canaan machines. Everything that we currently run is the latest generation from that manufacturer that's been released. Now, we think that's really important because ultimately efficiency drives the amount of power you consume. So we specifically have focused on the latest generation to be the most efficient. These are purpose-built. All they do is run the same algorithm for Bitcoin mining. The great thing about running at an industrial scale too is, our long-term plans is there's very robust, markets, secondary markets. These servers have, 5 to 7 year lives, depending on obviously how difficulty goes and where Bitcoin prices are at. And there's a very robust market. Our intention is to continually kind of roll through our entire fleet and, upgrade to the most efficient things as, new chips come out. Now, the great thing that we have is, we've reached an intersection point with Moore's laws and where the chips are at. as far as the nanometer size. And what really comes down to heat dissipation. The chips are going to continue to get smaller and faster, and probably follow a little bit of the same curve on Moore's law, but that changes a little bit in mining because of the heat impact. So, we'll probably do a more immersion cooling and less air cooled over the next couple of years. But, we do focus on using the latest and greatest mining rigs, because that, of course, keeps us profitable even in challenging markets like we're seeing today.
Oh, wow. I can tell your understanding of Bitcoin and energy is pretty elite. Just also because of your past history from 2014 to 2019 or so, before you made that decision. But what caused Cleanspark to pivot and maybe add this layer 2 on top of it, although it is actually a layer 1, unironically, and move from the energy company that you were before to then becoming an energy 2.0 company?
So personally, I went through the transition of fully understanding the space. I'll be honest, came from a full skeptic to, a full convert in, a several month period of time. And I know everybody has their, story of how they got from point A to point B, but, mine involved some frustration about the energy business. We were in the energy business to actually try and make an impact, to try and do something for the greater good as we saw it. And ultimately, it comes down to, feeling like you're banging your head against the wall, to try and, create sustainable paths to, improve power, improve sustainability on the grid, and improve resiliency. But then what I found is there was a tool, and the tool was Bitcoin. And we could accomplish so much better, whether you look at the, greater good for the grid, whether you look at the greater good of society, and all the things that Bitcoin does. Truly feeling like as myself as leading this company, that we could accomplish more with Bitcoin than we could running a traditional energy business, and then you layer on top of that it's more profitable. Obviously, as you mentioned, we're all capitalists, and, that was a driving factor. So, to be direct, I ended up walking into the boardroom. I've been the CFO for 6-7 years before. I've been the CEO for about 9 months. And 9 months later, I walk into the boardroom and I say, I think we need to change the company. There's actually a better way to do this. Obviously took a few meetings to bring along the board, but then we decided to jump in with both feet. We've invested over, $500 million roughly into the space. And we think we're doing exactly that. We are accomplishing more for society and at a more profitable rate for our shareholders than we were with the past business. And that's ultimately what got us from point A to point B. And, I think perspective, we had a very interesting perspective that also pushed us forward. And that was, we didn't jump on just because the bandwagon and because Bitcoin went to 40,000. We actually made this decision when Bitcoin was 10,000. It was in December of 2020. We made the decision. We had perspective. We said, I think we can do this. And we were really excited about the margins between where we could produce power and, $10,000, $12,000 Bitcoin. I think we were the right place, right time. Bitcoin goes to 40,000, the next month, which was obviously a good bonus. And we've still always managed, though. We managed towards the downside because our perspective is we made the decision to jump in with both feet at 10,000. So everything beyond that is all upside to us. Obviously difficulties, change that as it goes, but I think that's what's created our success. Some of our peers, they, just buried themselves with debt, and we're seeing that being the main cause of downfall is over leverage. And we approached it saying, hey, there's no guarantee that we don't go right back to where we started. And as long as we're managing towards that way, we'd be in the right place. You're going to hear me repeat it often, but strategy over ideology has always been our focus. We're here to provide the greater good for our shareholders and the ecosystem as a whole by being, that layer of infrastructure. Our goal isn't to always be, maximalist. We've been very clear. We sell our Bitcoin as we produce it. We try and hold some of it because we do believe in Bitcoin's long-term future, but we believe in being a solvent and sustainable company first, and always focusing on that being a strategy over, even when we believe in the ideology of where Bitcoin goes. I think that that's where sometimes, the market got lost. Is everybody wants Bitcoin to go to 100,000. It will go there someday, but being able to be protected against downside is something that we've always focused on.
It's very, very smart. As we spoke before about a bunch of miners being turned off because they're not able to keep their operation going because of the downside. I pulled up your financial performance and you can see there's just massive growth. Q3 2021 is 9 million in revenue to Q3 2022 and 31 million. And then you go down to the bottom of Q2 2022 is 37 million. And then Q3 2022 is 31 million. And that's, I'm assuming it has to do because of the drop in the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And speaking of strategy, what is the capital preservation strategy when you run a Bitcoin mining operation? Of course, everyone wants to buy high, sell low, or buy low, sell high, right? That's my strategy. The other one,
yeah.
But is it just something that you just try to sell all at one time? Do you stagger the selling of like a DCA or DC out? Or does the strategy change from year to year?
It changes moment to moment, I would say. Like we're very real about looking at the market and market signals, but we do largely take a dollar cost average approach. We've looked at it. We were selling Bitcoin, in the 60s and the 50s, just like we're selling Bitcoin in the 20s and high teens, because ultimately what we believe is it's a good investment to exchange Bitcoin into more Bitcoin. And what I mean by that is if we can sell Bitcoin to support operations to create more of it, then that's the right move. And I think that's where, my belief is some of our peers got lost with the HODL over all else strategy. It means they were sitting on big stacks at 69, and so they're sitting on the same number of Bitcoin right now, but they've now risked their company in, the upside. As a public company, we're lucky enough to have access to other capital, but we treat that capital responsibly in the sense that we build our company with equity over debt. We do have some debt, but like the terms and the market needs to mature. And we weren't going to take 20% interest on, and again, some of our peers did, but it was just a bad sustainable business practice move. But we take our equity, when we take equity, we put it in infrastructure. We truly believe that it's our responsibility to be able to support our own operations off of what we mine, and equity from our shareholders needs to build a bigger, stronger Bitcoin mine for the future. And that's why our growth has been constant. It's been steady. We've been able to, acquire a few other companies that got in hard spots. And it's just because we've managed risk every single day. So rather than trying to guess the market, we look at the market as it is today and we embrace it and we say it is what it is. And that's how we manage.
Yeah, and a man who's speaking true to his words, the Q3 2020 balance sheet, 13 million in liquidity, 34 million in liabilities, and 411 million in total assets. That is building some infrastructure, my friend. Holy Jesus. Wow. It's so this is cool that you have to put these reports out. You have a ton of assets. You guys are making a ton of growth. I pulled up one of the recent articles inside Yahoo Finance. The return trends at Cleanspark look promising, and it just goes on to talk about what we've just kind of been talking about over the last 20 minutes. As a CEO who's in charge of a publicly traded company and in the Bitcoin mining world, how available do you have to make yourself to media and to different sorts of requests, kind of like this kind of conversation? Do you dedicate a certain amount of time per week to it, or is it just something that you manage as you go?
Luckily, I've got a great team. So, we actually have, a full communications team that's essentially readily available. I myself, of course, have to manage the time, but I do think it's important. I think it's an important part of, again, our commitment to transparency. As much as I can is what I can say. And that varies week by week, day by day, what I can actually commit to these. But if you call into our office, you're gonna have a real person answer the phone. Then there's someone that's going to be able to chat with you. So it's frankly it's not going to be me in most cases, but we have really talented people that know exactly what we're doing and where we're going that can communicate with whether it's media or investors. And for us, that's really important that there's a real person to talk to, on the other end of the phone.
It's really important. I mean, we're moving into a digital world now where unless you want to get left behind, you have to have some sort of medium to translate your messaging through, whether it's Twitter, which is most of the crypto space, YouTube, podcasting, TikTok. You kind of have to, because everyone wants to have that sort of relatability to the founder or the CEO of that company. Like most people, I mean, it might be a little bit different now, but the majority of people bought Teslas in the beginning because of the CEO, right? They liked him, whether he's a meme lord or they perceive him to be highly intelligent or his entrepreneurial spirit. Like there's so many different facets to being a successful CEO and then having a successful community kind of like coalesce around you. So I do really, really respect that. And between the operations, which I'm clicking on here, and you're moving around to the renewable energy and decentralized currency, it's there's a lot of fluff out there in the space. A lot of it's kind of getting decimated at the moment. Is there any other sort of energy pursuits that Cleanspark follows, maybe a different proof of work token, or even things outside of the decentralized world to kind of hedge your bets or hedge your income so that you're not susceptible to these massive downturns when you're kind of like an all-in strategist?
We actually think that all in on Bitcoin is the right strategy. And it's partially because it's highly capital intensive. So, and also it's about focus. With a split focus, we run the risk of, splitting attention and missing the important things. So we really have truly focused that we're all in on, proof of work mining for Bitcoin, not for anything else. We're truly focused on that. Now, we have some fun with it every once in a while. Like we've issued NFTs and things like that we've done giveaways on, but we're not monetizing those. Those are like things that me and my team, we enjoy doing. And so we take advantage when we can. But we're not going to, for example, we're not going to launch, an NFT platform, and we're not going to, try and be the next, big NFT release. But we absolutely, we're people just like everybody else that truly believes in, again, I'll call it the ecosystem and the ins and outs of it. We truly believe in Bitcoin, and we like to have fun with some of the other pieces of it.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that you dabble in some of the other technologies, because as we know with the maximalist culture, it's kind of divulged to like it's Bitcoin or nothing. And, most people tend to kind of be in the middle where it's Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then maybe a handful of other ones. And then everything else is kind of truly speculation. So when you're dabbling with NFTs, are you issuing that on something like Stacks, which is built on Bitcoin, or using Ethereum to issue that? And what is your perspective, I guess, just on NFTs, because that seemed to just completely take over the crypto space this year. I mean, as somebody who'd been in it since 2016, I thought Bitcoin was the thing that made sense to everybody, saying, hey, decentralized currency, right? No one can repossess it from you. But it turns out that it was actually just tokens with pictures, or as Kobe would call it, all coins with pictures. Yeah. And it's pretty hard. It's pretty tough now to deny that NFTs are the main mechanism for onboarding new users into the ecosystem.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting entry point, right? So I love art. I like how art can affect people. And I think that different things speak to different people. Also, NFTs allow people some self-expression in different ways, right? Whether it's art or things like that. I think the future of NFTs personally, I think has to do with, potentially adding physical assets to the blockchain and, following their ownership all the way through. I think there's a ton of value yet to be unlocked. But I think that the art side is fun, and I think that that's why it's a great entrance point for people. Now, I don't dabble in it in the sense of seeing as an investment side. Personally for me, I appreciate the fun side of it, but I think that the value proposition is tricky, and it could just be that it's because it doesn't mesh with me personally in a way that it meshes with other people, and so there's that. That's why I said when we do NFTs, we give them away. We think it's fun, and I view it kind of the same way personally. Anything I'm going to do on that side is for fun. I don't really even see it as a speculative asset myself, not yet, and I think that there's still progress being made there. And maybe that progress leads to, some of the Decentraland types of projects and things like that, where, so much of our lives are already spent in the digital world. Maybe it changes as we go there a little further.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting parallels. I mean, I could see something in the future where you have an NFT represent one Bitcoin miner in a Bitcoin mining farm, which then you can sell that NFT to somebody. So then they have a stake in the mining share and revenue. So there's all kinds of future potential. It's just unfortunate that the community some of the people in the community tend to look past that when those kind of things and those kind of examples just lead to so much value that unlocks within the ecosystem. It's quite wild.
And I think that, unfortunately, where we risk stifling also some of this development with regulation. If it depends on how you use it and whether it's a security or not a security, there's a lot of maturity that needs to hit the space. And, again, I'm hopeful that we're going to be, and unfortunately, I think FTX maybe set us back, but we're going to be able to progress this space in a way where any regulation is hopefully self-regulation or smart regulation, as opposed to like a really heavy hand. And I think that that's something that's, kind of to be determined about the future utility of NFTs is hopefully they don't get stifled. So, but, time's going to tell, and there's a lot of smart people working on it. Cleanspark isn't, but we support everybody that is.
Awesome. Yeah, I really hope so. I mean, we're starting to see people speak out. I saw JP Morgan spoke out today and said that FTX was a debacle of centralization and not a protocol level mishap, which is quite often. But we know there's going to be some sort of regulation coming. People are speaking out on it. Does Cleanspark participate in lobbying or trying to get in on maybe some sort of like mining board or operation to try to help create that kind of smart regulation that we need?
We try and have a voice, but we approach it very grassroots. We're definitely not doing anything like FTX was, where they were throwing millions of dollars at things like that. So for us, it's more about education. That's really where we're focusing. I did have the opportunity to go to a Governors Association roundtable and participate in, a meeting that was strictly educational, to educate governors on what Bitcoin is, how it works, what the blockchain is, why blockchains are good, what they mean. Because I think that that's important. Is we need to, as an industry, always make sure that education and the voice, we can scream and yell and stomp and throw money, but like the reality is if we're in there, most politicians just don't really know what any of this is. So the more we can educate them to have them come to the conclusion that this is a good thing for society, that I think is what matters, more than trying to pass bills or control regulation, because ultimately there's so much, effort and dollars flying around in the background. We believe as a company, we may only be able to make a small dent if we approach it that way. So education, creating a community, creating allies is how we focused.
Absolutely. Incredible. I hope exactly for the same thing. So then throughout this entire conversation, the industry is growing. Right now, we're at the bottom of the bear market. Hopefully, we know that we're impending some sort of regulation. Outside of that, what do you think is the biggest hurdle for just the general crypto community that needs to overcome so that we ensure that there's some sort of promising future in the space?
Good question. And I think that my answer on this might be controversial to some of your listeners, but I think it really is. It's getting rid of some of the garbage, making sure that every project out there has utility and value that can be driven forward. There are some projects that are selfish, that without a lack of a better term, they're printing value out of thin air for a centralized ultimate group's value. And if some of that noise went away and the better projects got to stand alone, one, there's less scrutiny on projects providing real value. And two, if we can get rid of the amount of rug pulls that ultimately are happening out there in a variety of forms, that's going to lead to less regulation on the good stuff. And so I think that, again, it comes down to making choices with where people put their dollars and their voices. I think if people or the industry and the ecosystem as a whole comes together and truly says, hey, why create a new mousetrap that's yellow instead of blue and call it something different, right? Like, let's really focus on the things providing real value, and let's put all the effort into those. And then I think instead of arguing about the differences, sometimes as a community, we could come together and acknowledge the differences and why they're different and why they provide different value, and then move on. We truly, truly believe that Bitcoin is, I think, is the only one that can stand up as a true commodity and currency because of how the algorithm is built. But I think that there are other projects that can provide real utility in the space and that are needed. But then there's 50,000 other projects that don't need to exist. And that may not be a popular opinion, but I really think that is, that's the reality of the world we live in. And that's what's ultimately going to bring more positive outcomes into people's, net worths and to, less regulation.
Yeah, I tend to absolutely agree with you. I'm a holder of Bitcoin for a long time and Ethereum, and Bitcoin is going to be the base currency. I think it just has the most simplistic approach to it. To us that hang out in the crypto space, maybe Bitcoin is boring, right? They call it like the boomer coin now. But when you go try to explain crypto to your best friend or your mom, trying to explain some things complex like smart contracts just does not grasp it. Even trying to explain Bitcoin is tough at times. And to us, it's like the most simplistic form ever. So I don't think that's going to go away at any time soon. We might just have to face a little bit of a selling pressure here in the near future.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think it's just quality over quantity is the easiest way to say it, and unfortunately, there's just so many, ulterior motives behind some of the other projects out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming up on an hour now. It's been a quite incredible conversation. I'm so happy that you guys have moved out here. From a very selfish place, I'm going to end it with a Vegas question because we both live out here. What are your favorite hangout spots in Vegas?
Ooh, good question. I like to get out of town. I like to, go to Lake Mead, or I like to go to Red Rock. I like to mountain bike. So getting out of town is probably, a favorite, but you also can't beat the food on the Strip. The reason alone to come to Las Vegas is just to the restaurants and the food are awesome here. So, if I was to name, a cool place on the Strip that I do like, it's probably the Foundation Room.
Ooh, yeah.
Mandalay Bay, super cool. Probably the best view in town. Great place to grab a drink. But otherwise, there's a dozen 2 dozen restaurants that would easily make the list. But, me personally, getting out of town is probably still my favorite.
I'm actually quite similar to that. Foundation Room, for those who don't know, it's on the very top of Mandalay Bay, has an absolute gorgeous picture of the entire strip and view. It's a quite good place, very old school, and fabulous. But Zach, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come in here and talk. It's very enlightening to see people first out here in Vegas, building, but also those that are moving the Bitcoin mining operation forward past just the FUD and some of the concerns of how the power and energy is being extracted from the world. So I appreciate you for coming on the show.
Hey, absolutely, Jake. Anytime. Thanks for talking.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.